My husband and my best friend turned out to be lovers and partners in stealing every dollar I had right under my nose. If I'd known what would happen, I'd never have opened the door that afternoon. But there are moments in life when you want so desperately to feel alive again that you ignore the warnings, the cold chill in your gut, the little voice that whispers, "This is too good to be true." That day, autumn sunlight was slipping through the blinds, striping my kitchen table in gold and shadow. Daniel was napping after preschool, Tom was at work, and I was scrolling through photos on my phone, wedding, vacations, birthdays, proof that I'd once been the center of someone's world. Now our apartment felt silent. Tom and I had become polite strangers, orbiting each other with forced smiles and empty reassurances. He worked late. I stopped asking why. There was no drama, no shouting, just distance. Sometimes I wondered if loneliness could make you invisible, even to yourself. The sound of my phone buzzing startled me. It was a text from a number I hadn't saved, but the words were unmistakable. "M. Guess who's back in NYC? I need to see you. Same coffee shop as always?" "Sophie." I stared at the screen, heart racing in a way I hadn't felt in years. Sophie Laurent, my best friend from college, my partner in all-night talks and stupid adventures, the one who saw the best and worst of me and always made it feel okay. We'd lost touch, as adults do, but her name still carried the weight of old secrets and comfort. I texted back instantly. An hour later, Sophie burst into the coffee shop like she owned the city. Glossy hair, confident laugh, a presence that filled the room. She hugged me tight, the familiar scent of her perfume bringing memories rushing back. Dorm rooms, rooftop sunrises, whispered promises that we'd never become ordinary. She looked at me, really looked, and for the first time in months, I felt seen. Over lattes, she told me about her whirlwind years abroad. Consulting, investing, always moving, always in demand. I tried to describe my life, but the words felt small, gray around the edges. I joked about how adulting was mostly laundry and bills, but my laugh felt brittle. Sophie squeezed my hand. "M, you're still the most interesting person I know. You just forgot how to be." She was staying in the city for work, she said. Some investment project, a startup incubator. "You'd be amazing at this stuff, M," she insisted. "You were always the smart one." I went home that evening humming with a strange, bittersweet energy. Tom was already asleep on the couch, his laptop open, spreadsheets filling the screen. I stood in the doorway and watched him, wondering when we'd become two ghosts, sharing a life out of habit. Sophie and I started meeting often, lunches, walks in Central Park, evenings at my place with Daniel chattering between us. She fit into my world with alarming ease, lighting it up in ways I didn't realize I'd missed. She brought little gifts, flowers for my kitchen, a book for Daniel, wine for late-night chats. She asked about Tom, listened to my hesitant confessions, how I sometimes felt like a guest in my own marriage, how Tom never really saw me anymore, how much I missed feeling wanted. Sophie never judged, never pitied me. She made me laugh, made me forget my own disappointments. And she listened. God, did she listen. One night, after too much wine, she put her arm around my shoulders and whispered, "You deserve more than just getting by, Em. You deserve to be chosen." It was around then that she brought up the first investment. Small, safe, just for fun. "I've got this contact. It's nearly a sure thing. I want you to have a little win." I hesitated, but she was so confident, so generous, and the idea of something that was mine, just mine, was intoxicating. I put in a few $100s. A week later, she messaged, "Congrats, it hit. Double your money. Told you, you're luckier than you think." I felt a fizz of pride, excitement, a secret thrill I didn't share with Tom. As days blurred into weeks, Sophie's presence became a lifeline. She made the world feel bigger, brighter. She made me believe, if only for a moment, that I could be extraordinary again. And yet, even then, the first cracks had begun to appear. Tom started coming home earlier, eager to talk finances with Sophie. I'd catch them sharing long conversations in the kitchen, laughing about things I didn't understand. Sometimes I saw them exchanging texts late at night. I told myself it was business. I told myself it was nothing. But deep down, something old and cold began to stir inside me. A warning I was too lonely to listen to. If I'd known what was coming, I might have run. But I was already in too deep. And the worst part was, I wanted to be. I used to think there was nothing more intoxicating than being seen, wanted, chosen. But I was wrong. The real addiction is uncertainty, the sharp, giddy fear that you might lose it all in an instant. With Sophie back in my life, the days grew brighter and stranger. She became the pulse of our little world. Inside jokes, impromptu dinners, the laughter echoing long after Daniel went to sleep. Even Tom seemed lighter, his usual reserve melting away under Sophie's effortless charm. I'd never admit it, but I started living for her messages. Miss you, Em. Tomorrow night? Just us girls. You always make me feel at home. Sometimes, after a glass of wine too many, Sophie would reach for my hand or rest her head on my shoulder. There was nothing overt, nothing I could point to as wrong, but the air between us shimmered with possibilities I tried not to name. The first time she brushed her lips against my cheek, I froze, my skin tingled. She laughed it off, acting like it was nothing, but I lay awake all night, my thoughts burning and tangled, excited, confused, guilty. For days I replayed that moment in my mind, half wishing it had gone further, half afraid it would. With Tom, things were different. I noticed him taking extra care with his appearance when Sophie was around. Sharper shirts, aftershave he hadn't worn in years. I told myself not to read into it, but the way his eyes followed her around the room, the quiet conversations in the hallway, the text messages sent after midnight, it was all there, waiting for me to see. But I didn't want to see, not yet. Instead, I leaned harder into the rush of being Sophie's favorite. She called me her lucky charm. She asked my opinion on everything: wine, shoes, business, investments. I began to measure my worth in her approval, her laughter, her touch. Sophie started talking bigger numbers. This next opportunity, Em, only for my inner circle. Minimum buy-in is high, but the returns are insane. And I want you in. I hesitated. It was more money than I'd ever risked. But Tom was in the next room, singing Daniel to sleep. And Sophie was looking at me like I was the most important person in the world. I wired the money that night. My hands were shaking, but the thrill drowned out my fear. Sophie squeezed my arm and whispered, "You're braver than you know. You're exactly who I thought you'd be." For a while, it felt like winning. My investment doubled, then tripled, at least on paper. Sophie sent screenshots of rising numbers, updates about how our project was crushing it. She told Tom too, inviting him to join. At first he balked, but then he surprised me. Maybe we could use a win, he said, and sent his own transfer, more than I dared. That was when things started to shift. Tom and Sophie began meeting without me, calling it business. Sometimes Sophie would arrive at our place after dinner, makeup fresh, eyes bright, and Tom would light up in a way that made my heart sink. I started to feel like a guest in my own home. Daniel would ask for Sophie to read his bedtime story, and Tom would disappear onto the balcony with her. Voices low, faces shadowed by city lights. The jealousy was ugly, raw, and worse. I felt ashamed for feeling it at all. Hadn't I wanted this? A little chaos, a little spark. I was grateful for Sophie's presence, her magic. But I also resented how much of her she gave to Tom. How easily she moved between us, always just out of reach. One Saturday night, Sophie and I stayed up late, laughing until our sides ached. She leaned in close, her lips brushing my ear. "You know, you could have anyone you want, Em." I felt my heart race. "What about you?" I whispered, almost a dare. She looked at me, really looked at me, and for a moment I thought she might say yes. Instead, she just smiled, a little sadly. I'm not good at being owned, but I like being wanted. The next day, I found Tom's phone buzzing with a text from Sophie. "Lunch tomorrow? Need your advice. Emma doesn't get this stuff like you do." A hot, sick feeling spread through me. I told myself it was work. I told myself not to be petty. But a seed of suspicion had been planted, and now it was growing roots. Meanwhile, my bank balance was shrinking. Sophie explained it away. Market fluctuations, temporary holds. Just let me manage it, Em. I've got your back. I trusted her. I wanted to trust her. Maybe more than I'd ever wanted to trust anyone. But late at night, staring at the empty side of the bed where Tom used to be, I couldn't stop the questions. Who did Sophie really want? Who did Tom want? And where did that leave me, clinging to scraps of affection, blind to the storm gathering right above my head? I didn't know it then, but the game was almost over. And I was never the player. I'd been the prize all along. Sometimes you don't realize how close you are to the edge until the world drops out from under your feet. For weeks, I'd been living in a fog of half-truths and anxious questions. Tom was distant, irritable. Sophie was harder to reach. Her replies clipped, her laughter thinner. My investment had stopped updating. I tried to tell myself it was all just a rough patch, that soon everything would click back into place. But I was lying. I was lying to myself because the truth was too sharp, too shameful to face. It started one Friday evening. I was putting Daniel to bed when I heard Tom's phone buzz in the kitchen. I told myself not to look, but the urge was unbearable. His lock screen was open, a mistake he'd never made before. There it was, a text from Sophie. Tonight was incredible. I can still smell you on my skin. Miss you already? Paris next? My hands shook as I scrolled through their conversation. Inside jokes, plans for private dinners, photos, selfies in hotel rooms. Tom's hand tangled in Sophie's hair, her lips on his neck. The world blurred. For a moment, I thought I might be sick right there on the kitchen floor. My heart was pounding, not just from the betrayal, but from humiliation, rage, a grief so huge it seemed to fill every corner of my body. I stormed into the bedroom, phone clenched in my fist. "Are you sleeping with her?" Tom didn't even bother to lie. He just stared at the wall and said quietly, "I'm sorry, Em." The tears didn't come right away. I felt too hollow, too stunned. "How long?" he shrugged. "A few weeks. I don't know how it happened." My mind spun, all those nights alone, all the dinners where I watched them laugh together, all the times I'd let myself believe Sophie was my lifeline, not my executioner. I wanted to scream, to break things, but Daniel was sleeping, and the silence felt heavier than any rage. And then, as if the universe wanted to make sure I couldn't breathe, I checked my bank account. The numbers didn't make sense. The savings, gone. The investments, gone. Every cent Tom and I had put away for years had vanished, funneled into accounts Sophie controlled. Sophie didn't answer my calls. Her number was suddenly disconnected. Her social media went dark overnight. It was as if she had never existed at all. For 2 days, I drifted through the apartment like a ghost. Tom tried to talk, but I could barely look at him. Daniel sensed something was wrong and clung to me, wide-eyed and silent. At night, I replayed every conversation, every smile, every touch. Had Sophie ever cared? Or was I just another mark, a foolish, lonely woman desperate for attention? And what about Tom? Was he victim, accomplice, or both? It was during one of those sleepless nights that I searched for Sophie online. Buried in a financial forum, I found a thread. Beware, Sophie Laurent investment scam? Hundreds of replies. Stories like mine, women and men, some single, some married. All lured in by Sophie's charm, her guaranteed returns, her ability to make you feel seen. I wasn't the first. I wasn't even special. I was just the next in a long line of people who wanted to believe in magic. That realization hurt more than all the rest. But then something shifted in me. Beneath the grief, beneath the shame, a spark of anger caught fire. I was done being a victim. Sophie had stolen my money, my trust, my marriage, but she would not have the last word. I reached out to a few other victims. I called the police, and then after 3 days of silence, I sat Tom down at the kitchen table, our ruined altar, and said, "We're not letting her get away with this. Not to us, not to anyone else." For the first time in weeks, I saw a glimmer of the man I'd married. Broken, yes, but angry too. We weren't partners anymore, not really, but for now, we had a common enemy. And sometimes, that's enough to start fighting back. I never thought I'd sit across from Tom again and feel anything but rage. But after Sophie, rage had burned itself out, leaving only resolve. We were no longer husband and wife, not in any real sense, but we were still Daniel's parents, and for now, allies with a score to settle. We started by sharing every scrap of information we had, every email, every transaction, every text message. I sent messages to the other victims I'd found online, men and women scattered across the city, all of them with the same story. Sophie's trust, Sophie's smile, Sophie's promise of something more. We pooled our stories and realized her pattern was perfect. She targeted people who were lonely, drifting, or quietly desperate for attention. She offered them a lifeline, affection, adventure, the hope of easy money. And then, once she had their trust, she moved on to the next mark. Sometimes she seduced husbands, sometimes wives, sometimes both. But Sophie's flaw was her pride. She liked to be in control. She liked to win. And above all, she liked to be wanted. Tom and I devised a plan. I created a new email, wrote a message laced with all the vulnerability I'd once given Sophie so freely. I'm lost without you. I need your help. I have money, more than before. I just want to talk. For days, there was nothing. Then, late one night, Sophie replied, cautious, curious, her words still edged with that old warmth. She agreed to meet. We alerted the police and arranged for the meeting at a busy cafe near our apartment. Tom waited across the street with an officer and a small recorder. 2 other victims sat nearby, watching, ready to corroborate every detail. When Sophie walked in, my heart nearly stopped. She looked the same, confident, radiant, unfazed by the mess she'd left behind. She smiled as if we were still friends. Emma, you look beautiful. I've missed you. I could barely keep my hands from shaking. I want to believe you, Sophie. I want to trust you again. But I need answers. Why us? Sophie's eyes flashed. Amusement, annoyance, maybe even pity. You needed me, Em. Both of you did. I just gave you what you wanted. For a moment, I saw the truth. There was no love, no loyalty in her. Only hunger for power, for admiration, for the thrill of the con. That was when Tom and the police came in. Sophie's face didn't even flinch. She just raised her chin, as if daring us to judge her. The officer read her rights, and as they led her away, she glanced back at me. You'll thank me one day, she whispered. You needed to wake up. The aftermath was messier than I'd imagined. There were interviews, statements, endless paperwork. We never got all our money back, only a fraction, but it was never really about the money. It was about reclaiming our lives. Tom and I didn't magically repair our marriage. Too much had broken, too much trust lost. But we learned to talk again, if only for Daniel's sake. We learned to share our grief, to forgive ourselves for what we'd missed and what we'd lost. I shared my story on forums, in support groups, and eventually in a long, raw post online. I heard from strangers around the world, men, women, people who'd trusted the wrong friend, the wrong lover, the wrong hope. There is no easy ending to a story like this, but there is survival, there is honesty. There is the quiet triumph of knowing you refuse to stay a victim. Some nights, I still hear Sophie's laughter in my dreams, bright and cruel, a ghost of everything I once wanted. But most mornings, I wake up, take Daniel to school, and feel a little lighter, a little wiser. I don't trust so easily now, but I do believe in my own strength, and that finally is enough.